thank you so much for joining us today for our member lunch on International Women's Day. Yeah. We are thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. So first of all, could you please introduce yourself, tell us about your entrepreneurship journey, and talk to us about Doyenne?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, Harvir. I'm the founder of Doyenne. Doyenne is a flexible working platform aimed at getting more women into mid to senior level roles and on a flexible basis. So when you look at most corporates, SMEs, not-for-profits, junior entry level, you'll have equal numbers of men and women, or even majority women. You start to look up the ranks and women just disappear. And that's across sectors, across industries, and across size of company. So when you look at the age or the level that women tend to drop off, it's kind of the childbearing age, so late 20s, early 30s. And it's kind of the time when you should be in the talent pipeline on your way to a leadership role. So I'm working with companies to get more women back into work or progressing, but on a flexible basis. So if you have children or caring responsibilities, there's no reason, especially with technology these days, why you need to be at your desk all day, every day. And sometimes people assume when I say flexible working, that means part-time, but that's not true at all. Some women just want to work from home 1 day a week, and that would make all the difference in their lifestyle and their work-life balance and the mental load and all the pressures that they have. So that, just in a nutshell, is Doyenne.
And can you tell us a bit more how the idea came about?
Yeah. So it was partly through my own personal experience and then compounded by all of the horrendous stories that I've heard from other women. So I fell pregnant 2 years ago, and I just thought, I'm going to have a child. I'm super ambitious about my career, so the child is just going to fit into my life and I'm going to carry on. My manager kept asking me, like, oh, once you have a child, like once after maternity leave, do you want to come back full-time, part-time, what do you want to do? And the whole period while I was pregnant and then on maternity leave, I just kept saying, I don't know, because I don't know how I'm going to feel. Like, I imagine I will want to keep working full-time because I'm really ambitious and I love working. But then once my baby arrived, everything changed. Everything changed. I just couldn't believe that I thought that I would just want to carry on working. I wanted a balance. I wanted both. I wanted to carry on my career, but I wanted time with my family and my son as well. So I put in a flexible working request. It was approved. I'd be working 80% of the time I used to work, but suddenly I would be doing 50% of the role I did. And basically that was my manager telling me that I was not going to progress. I mean, how would I ever get promoted doing half the role I did before? So for me, that wasn't good enough, and I ended up resigning and not going back to work in the corporate that I was working at. But my story isn't even as bad as some of the horrific stories that I've heard. Every year, 54,000 women suffer from maternity or pregnancy-related discrimination. So many are pushed out of their jobs. And it's just such a waste of talent. Like, these are women who, got degrees, companies have trained them, potentially even paid for their training, and then they just let them go. And then we see all these statistics, like with the gender pay gap reporting, and women are paid less than women, they're missing from leadership roles, and there's targets about getting women onto boards. It's just something that I felt so passionate about after going through it and seeing what other people were going through, and I just couldn't believe that there aren't enough solutions out there. So I'm just trying to do my bit, basically, through Doyenne.
Amazing. Do you want to tell us what's on the board?
So I thought a way of kind of demonstrating just kind of, because, I'm targeting mid to senior level roles at women. I'm trying to address a problem that we face right now. But the problem actually starts right from birth. I mean, from when we're children, from the toys that we play with, from the advertising that we're exposed to, from the messages that we're shown right from an early age, all the way through secondary school, university, the degree choices we make. So women more often, obviously, are less likely to go into STEM roles, and then less likely to go into take up STEM subjects, and then less likely to go into STEM roles in the workplace, etc. And this is all ingrained in us from a very early age. So right now I'm working on supporting women back into mid to senior level roles, but actually we need to start right back from the influence that we have on children from a young age. And I just thought this riddle really highlights the problem. So for those that can't see it, I'll just tell you what it says. So a father and son are driving along a windy road, and suddenly a truck comes from nowhere and hits the car. The father gets out of the car, he's unharmed, but the boy is badly injured. They're rushed to the hospital, and as the boy is lying on the operating table, waiting for surgery, the surgeon comes in and looks at the boy and says, I can't operate on this boy, he's my son. How is this possible? So, I'm worried that the first person who responds is going to get the answer right.
I know it, so I'm not going to.
Yeah. Do you want to?
I'm not going to say the right answer, but I just want to say I read it and I was really shocked about myself.
Yeah.
Because I thought, is a surgeon God or is it a gay couple?
Yeah, I've heard this. So most common people say, oh, the father was unharmed, so it's the father. I'm not going to point out who it was, but earlier, right now, like 5 minutes ago, someone guessed it was the grandfather. Last night, I asked my husband just to check how common, because this is becoming quite a common riddle that people ask, and he's heard it before, and I've said it to him before, and he said to me, oh, it's a gay couple in a civil partnership, and so it's the other father. I was equally disappointed but glad that he said that answer.
So can I still say the answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
So she's the mother who was the doctor. Yeah?
Exactly, yeah. So a female can be a surgeon, but I think it's like something like 70% or more of people automatically try to come up with any answer that is not a woman, because that's what we're told. We're exposed to all these images of like scientists being men, of surgeons, doctors being men. Nurses, you'll say, oh, it's a woman. If that was a nurse came in, of course, you'd be like, oh, it's the mother. So yeah, I just thought that highlighted the issue really well.
Mm-hmm. And which makes me jump to the next question, which is, why do you think a diverse and inclusive culture is important for any company?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of reasons, but fundamentally, it just makes business sense. So I mean, there's so many horrendous examples, but like our phones, like they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're perfect for male hands, and men can easily, hold it up and take a selfie. We females, we need these because phones are not made for our hands. So Google Home. You have Alexa and all of those ones, but Google Home is 70% more likely to recognize a male voice than a female voice. Voice controls in cars, like for instance, I think they tested Audis, 90% or something more likely to recognize a male voice than a woman. So when I talk to, we have an SUV, and when I talk to it, it never understands me. When I try and say an address, my husband says an address, and off we go. So, and why is this? Because women are probably missing from the design process, from the testing process, and then the manufacturing. We're just missing. So if you haven't got a diverse team that is putting all the thinking behind the products and the services that you're putting out to the market, you're not reaching the needs of the market, you're not meeting the needs of the market. And even last night I just read a stat, so a venture firm looked back at its portfolio over the past 10 years and looked at the companies it invested in. And it found that firms that had at least one female founder in the team performed 63% better than firms that were just male founded. So, I mean, stats just don't lie.
Yeah, numbers, right?
Yeah, and then we just end up really crappy products that, women just complain about. And it's like, well,
that don't fit.
Put add-ons. But sometimes it can be fatal. So cars, I already mentioned, obviously, the voice activation, but the seating position in a car is actually 17% more fatal for a woman if they're in a car crash, because we sit out of the normal driving position. So the normal driving position is designed for a man, so legs are longer, so we sit closer to the wheel. So it's fatal, like that design error is fatal, more fatal for women. And the same with seat belts. It's all about, male muscle mass and male height, and it's just not. So when female dummies are used, they're put in the passenger seat. So if we're sitting in the driving seat, we're not in position, and a seatbelt is not designed for us. So I don't know. There's so many examples I just go on about, but I won't.
And so today is International Women's Day. The theme this year is Balance for Better. How do you think this is an opportunity for companies, especially smaller structure? We're dedicated to small businesses. We're still a startup ourselves. Can you give tips, actionable tips for smaller structure to help their culture, reflect on their culture, their recruitment standards and policies?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not a diversity and inclusion specialist, so there are people out there who have, this is what you should be doing. But I mean, there's just simply, I just believe that you need to be conscious of the efforts that you're making in this. So I don't think you can accidentally create a very diverse company. And if that happens, then great. But I don't think that's possible. So for instance, especially with a startup, say you have a founding team, which is, statistics show it's more likely to be male. You you will start a company with somebody that you already know from some point in your life, whether you went to university together, whether you grew up together, or whether it's an ex-colleague from a company. So in some ways, there's probably already something that makes you just like each other. It's like you're, in-group. We all have this in-group bias. We kind of gravitate towards people who are like us, and then we keep those connections. And then when you make your first hire, you're probably in a position where you're like, oh, well, this hire is really important to the company. I need somebody I can trust. I need somebody I know can do the job. And again, you'll probably end up recruiting somebody from your network because you're like, this is so important, I need to know who they are. So again, you'll probably recruit somebody who looks just like the founding team. And that could go on for a while. So, and then maybe you'll get to a point where you're like, oh, hold on, we've got a whole bunch of people that we've employed and they're all kind of from our networks and we're not looking very diverse right now. So I think at some point, you'll have to make a conscious decision to identify how you want to be diverse and what that might look like. So I was talking to a startup just last year who's been going for about 5-6 years, and she said, she's a solo female founder, and she said she had KPIs. It's like, I want a diverse workforce that meets these, represents these communities. And that's not just gender, obviously. There's like ethnicity, disabilities. There's like so many ways in which you can be diverse. So I think it's just about making a conscious effort, and it's not just in your recruitment. So obviously you want to eliminate any bias that you might have in your recruitment process and make sure you're advertising in a wide range of places so you're not just attracting the same people who might be going to the certain website that you might be going to. And then at the interview process, obviously making it as removing as many biases as possible. But also I think it's building a company culture that feels inclusive. So even if you manage to recruit people who are diverse, if you're not living by the values that makes them feel included, then they'll leave. So even that retaining talent, you want to make sure that you live it right from recruitment through to your daily operations.
Absolutely. And I know, for instance, within our people's team, it's been a challenge, but also they've been making sure to even change the language in which they describe the jobs roles to make sure we're inclusive as much as possible. Yeah. So it's every details counts.
Yeah, it's even like, so corporates have an issue where, I've said that women are missing from senior roles, but even like from the like a BAME perspective, so ethnic minorities are missing from senior levels as well, and that's often because they end up leaving those companies because they feel like they don't fit in. They don't. You have to. There's that saying, you have to see it to be it. And often people look up at companies and they're like, well, I don't see myself. I don't see any ethnic minorities, or I don't see women. I don't whatever. And you think, I'm not going to get there here, and then you leave to join a company where you see potentially you will get there. And sometimes it can be small things like, we have this culture in the UK where every Friday night we'll go to a pub and have drinks or whatever, which some of us love, some people don't. And if that's the way that everybody socialises in the company and there's nothing else in the week for anybody else to feel included in, that's already a group you're excluding from that. Right. So I guess it's just like finding ways to make people genuinely feel included, like throughout the way that you live your company values and culture. Absolutely. And so you've been running Doyenne for a few months now. Could you share with us a success story? Sure. So I've been going a few months, but as with most startups, I pivoted. So last summer I was doing something a little bit different, last summer, autumn. And I have a few success stories, including matching Tide with a female photographer, so that was really good. But now my business is more kind of getting women into mid to senior level roles, obviously, in any business. And it's an online platform that just went live in January. So it feels like I'm just starting completely anew again. But within 3 weeks of going live, I managed to get basically, I didn't do it, the platform did it, but it matched a woman with a role who she had a child a few years ago and left permanent employment because she couldn't return. She'd been freelancing in order to get a kind of work-life balance that worked for her. But she was able to get a permanent role on a full-time basis. So flexibility, as I said, is not just part-time, but she was able to work 3 days a week from home, and she's now able to progress her senior career, which she had left off after having a child. So it's pretty amazing that happened in the first 3 weeks, but I need that to keep happening.
Absolutely. So, sounds great. I'm sure the team is going to have a lot of questions about this and about Doyenne especially. But before we do that, before we jump into the Q&A, what we really love during those member lunches is to get feedback from our members. So could you tell us for how long you've been a member of Tide and how you heard about us?
Yeah, so I signed up probably, I think, September, October last year when I was going to have my first clients paying me, and I was like, oh, I don't know where they're going to pay me. So I've been operating for a while without a bank account. And I kind of just asked around, so I'm a part of a few communities like freelancers and self-employed people, and Tide kept coming up on a regular basis. I mean, I know you've asked me about feedback, but I mean, I don't really have anything to compare it to because this is my first business account. Although I did open I remember a charitable account a few years ago for a charity I started with, existing retail bank. And I just remember there was so much paperwork and there was like a 10-day lag. So, it's pretty impressive that now I'm able to take a picture of my driver's license and then 10 minutes later I've got a bank account open and available on my mobile. So, yeah.
Amazing. And is there anything in specific that you would say Tide helped you with?
I think it's just really simple. I mean, I have, I think I mentioned to you earlier, so I have accounting software that I get free through my accountant. So they want me to use that. Otherwise, if I use something else and they won't look at it. So I prefer looking at Tide where I can just see everything categorized and I can see what's coming in, what's going out. So it's just simple, really. It just makes life much easier. It's just one less hassle. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Amazing. Thank you so much, Harvir,
thank you.
for, talking to us about Doyenne, sharing your feedback. This is super helpful to us, super interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to jump to the Q&As, guys. Who has a question?
I'm sure you talk to companies that are very excited about what you're doing, and I'm sure you talk to companies or senior people that don't really care. And it'd be good to understand what's the rationale of both and like what they are thinking either positively or negatively.
And I mean, I think I've been quite lucky so far in terms of, well, it's not lucky. I think people just realise that there's an issue. I mean, there are very few companies that are immune to this issue of women missing at the top, and they do want to do something about it. There's probably a little bit more pushback in terms of, but this role can't be flexible because we need them in the office because, they need to be present, and that's something that we need to challenge because it's like, is that really true? But I mean, like I've been talking to a national charity which would say there's 75% of their workforce is female, so you'd think they've nailed it. But they completely admitted that, at the heads of department level, women are the very small minority, and above that, they're just missing. So, so I can't say that I'm lucky because it's terrible that we're in this situation, but actually companies, not-for-profits, large scale, small scale, everyone gets it. It's an issue that they need to address.
Thanks.
Lawrence.
Hi. So as one of the older people in the office, I'm ashamed to say, I can really relate to what you're talking about here, and my wife has been through some similar experience, and I just thought it'd be just good to put a bit of context on what I see really happening, because sometimes I think if you haven't had kids and you're young and you're starting out and you think, well, it's possible we can do all these things and then when you see that maybe women can't get to the top, it also looks like it's some sort of prejudice or gender imbalance. But in reality, just looking at my wife's situation, Nikki had kids and before then she was like super successful. She was like a first grad, very senior at Accenture, worked in investment banking, had an incredible career. And she decided she wanted to spend some time with the kids when they were born. And trying to get back into work is really hard, really, really hard, even though she has an incredible CV. And the reality of the situation is that when you have kids who go to school, you have to drop them off and then you have to pick them up. And they don't get picked up at like 7 o'clock in the evening when we all, pile home. You want to get them home, fed, and then there's homework. And yeah, we could get a nanny and somebody else to do that, but she feels she really wants to be there in the evenings. And what she really would love is some time where she can come home a bit earlier and then pick work back up again in those flexible hours. And a lot of companies, they just don't want that. They want you there until 6, 7 o'clock, and then back home. And that for her is, a massive, life choice basically. So I think there are so many practicalities as to why this is an issue. And I think that what you're doing right now is great, because this is what's needed. I think it's almost a re-education of the workplace. Companies need to understand that actually, we can be flexible. We can have people working in the evenings or working even when it suits them, and not necessarily have this kind of strict working pattern that we've become used to. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of give a bit of context and say that, yeah, I think this is really great what you're doing.
No, I completely, you know, you mentioned Accenture where she worked, but, you know, the big consultancies are really, like, slowly they're getting it. So, like, I think it was, what was it? Not KPMG. Maybe it was KPMG. And they've launched a school hours role. So they want women to come back, work school hours, specifically in their audit stream. But, you know, they've realised that women are missing an audit. How do we get them back? So you can literally work for a massive corporate just doing school hours. Because why not? You know, why do you need to be there at those set hours when you could be picking up your kid and doing bedtime? So I think slowly things are changing, and people get it because it's just talent's missing. They're not serving the needs of their clients, and also there's pressure on companies. So, you know, the consultancies, their suppliers are asking them, like, we want to see your gender balance, we want to see what's happening in your company. So they have to show that they're leading the way. So if we just keep the pressure up and we keep having the conversations, I think it helps massively.
And it's about that as well, right? It's about having the conversation, challenging it
Yeah.
every day, not just today on International Women's Day.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I always get not challenged about but questioned about is why it's just that women should have flexibility, and I don't believe that at all. I believe the only way we're going to get to an equal position is when men and women are just as likely as each other to take 6 months off for maternity or paternity leave, or 12 months. And so how can an employer be biased against women? And the same with flexible working. You know, if a man is just as likely to put in a request as a female to do flexible working, then why should an employer be biased against women? But as I've already said, like, with this whole from birth till now, we've just been ingrained with this: women go down these kind of routes or in these kind of roles. We're in a position where most of the time men are earning more than women. And so when it comes to making a decision as to who's going to stay home, it's more likely going to be the man, because they'd be foregoing more of an income if the woman was to return to work. So I think it'll be a while till we get there. So in the interim, I'm focused on getting women back into work on a flexible basis, but ultimately I believe it has to be equal, and it should be men and women. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Yes.
Hi, we've talked about sort of women not progressing because of children, but actually, you know, statistics show that a woman is less likely to apply for a senior job if they don't tick every single box, whereas a man's more likely to apply and just sort of give it a go. Is there anything you've got in the pipeline to kind of look at some of those other issues, you know, not just sort of around childcare and children, and sort of what are the conversations that you've been having so far?
So I love that you've mentioned that statistic, because no one knows where it came from. So it came from a HP. So basically, it came from, McKinsey put it out saying it came from an internal HP survey or HP research. Then, like, I've tried to search for it. I was like, okay, where is this survey? Where is this research? So a few other people have put out articles where they've tried to dig down and find out where this stat was. Never been found. But then, has anybody ever done more research to find out why that is, or is that true, and why that is? So the problem, I think, right now is lots of things are being implemented, and, you know, stats like this become headlines, and then people think, oh, we need to implement policies to address this. But there's not enough research being done. I feel like if this was a male problem, there'd probably be tons of research and tons of money thrown at this. Because it's a female problem, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, we'll see, we'll try this. So I think we need to be moving to a space where we have more evidence-based policies and evidence-based practices. And that's something I personally am trying to reach out to different organisations and institutions like universities, where I'm like, can we do more research on this? So I'm currently on Cambridge University's incubator for social ventures, and I want to work with somebody who can do some research and help provide some more evidence so that we can move the conversation forward. Because that stat that you've said is used over and over and over, and no one knows where it came from. So yeah.
There is also an issue. Like, it's not just women that don't have children don't rise to the top. There are plenty of women that don't have children that still don't rise to the top. And why is that? That would be interesting to dig into.
I think so. I think that we need more research into all of this, like, why is this and what's the evidence to show. But I mean, I believe a lot of it comes down to these biases that we're ingrained with, you know, through childhood upwards. So for instance, there was a survey done just late last year, but also done a few years ago, and the same result has come up in both surveys, where employers were asked, employers admitted, 40% of them admitted that they are likely to not hire a woman of childbearing age. And that's the bias they have. Whereas if a man was sitting there thinking, oh, you're probably going to have a kid soon, there's statistics that show that employers actually view dads as better, or dads to be as better employees, because they believe they'll be more loyal, and they'll have a good work ethic because they have to provide for their family. But a woman in the exact same position, they're thinking, oh, she's just going to slack off, and it's ridiculous. There's so much hypocrisy and so many double standards, and that's just ingrained with us. So we just need to. I mean, it's our generation, I think, as we raise kids, to be addressing this, which is hard because media advertising is basically, a battle on a daily basis, isn't it? Yes.
Discussion is not from women perspective, this is more of Tide perspective, because you're a Tide customer and you support women than us, I think, very strongly. So when you register for Tide, when you received your card, did you ever think why it's in blue?
Well, actually, I got given the International Women's Day sweets that were blue and white, and my immediate thought, I forgot that your branding was blue and white. I was like, oh, I love that these are not pink. So I love that it's blue. I mean, the pet peeve is when boys' stuff is blue and girls' stuff is pink. So, yeah.
I'd also like to say that card was designed by a woman.
Well, the gold trim, I'd say the gold trim is probably down to a woman. So, yeah.
Great. Do we have one last question, Sally? Yes, two actually. Rosanna and Nice.
Hi.
Hi.
I was looking to your website and I had a little bit question about a project and Doyenne, is it correct?
Doyenne.
Doyenne group. So that you're connecting like-minded women, and also you have kind of a position like volunteer positions. Can you tell a little bit more about it? Is it to jumping in on some startup entrepreneurship project and working together, or?
Yeah, so while the platform is supposed to support women back into work or progress in their careers if they're working currently, on the other side, I want to build a supportive community. So for instance, when I was going through what I was going through with my previous employer, and I was like, where can I turn to? I mean, I had my mummy groups who talked about mummy things, and I had people who were at work who just talked about, they'd returned to work basically, and they weren't doing this whole, I'm trying to balance both. And I was like, where do I turn to? And it was just this vacuum. So I'm trying to build a community so that no matter what stage of your career you're in, no matter what pressures you're facing at that moment, you can join this community of like-minded women and say, okay, well, I'm currently thinking that I care about my career, but I also care about my family. Let's have a conversation, let's share our challenges. Because sometimes just hearing that other women are battling the same thing would have been so helpful. So many of my friends returned to work full time because they couldn't afford to even drop a day off, because then they wouldn't be able to afford like the lifestyle they were living. So, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. I do want to reduce. And I was just like, I don't know, I just wanted to open up more options for women, places to turn to. And I think the volunteering that you mentioned was kind of, I'm bringing experts to the table. So I'm running basically a webinar series where I'll bringing like CV writers, career coaches, personal stylists and things like that. So on a monthly basis, there'll be a different topic that addresses building women's confidence, and that's whether they're returning to work or whether they want to progress in their careers, and so they can join that for free. So basically just want to build a community side as well as the whole joining with employer side.
Very nice.
Thanks.
Mine's really just building on Oyster's question.
Yeah.
So you say that your platform matches women who are looking to work again with future opportunities. Can you tell us a bit more about how that works? Do you have partnerships directly with institutions that are looking to bring women more into positions, or do you use existing sites and you kind of accumulate all those jobs and
yeah, lots of people think I just scour the internet and I get lots of jobs and I just stick them on my site. I don't. So it's about bringing employers on board and having them bought into the idea that actually, this is an issue they want to address. Or even if they don't feel like it's an issue, they just want more applicants for women. Because some of the things, like for instance, you said that women don't apply for roles in the first place. So I used to work in an investment bank, and we were looking at the graduate side where, well, I was talking to the HR team, we're looking at the graduate side, where they were like, actually, girls, women who come out of university aren't even applying for like the front office investment banking roles. They're applying more for like the corporate office side roles. So it's like, how do you get them in the pipeline? So I think that's really important to address that side too. So if I was just aggregating jobs from elsewhere, if I wasn't having these conversations with employers, then I wouldn't really be able to drill down to be like, well, maybe you can do this and maybe you can take this approach. So I am building relationships with corporates, SMEs and not-for-profits to get them on the site. And just at the moment, I'm focusing on getting jobs on the live. and highlighting what flexibility is available. But ultimately, I want it to be a two-way conversation on the site. So employers are able to build, for instance, like an employer page, and then really shout about how they're diverse and how they're inclusive. And then women are able to, like, for instance, like that page, and then they get alerts when jobs come up, or they're able to attend events put on by those companies. So I just feel like there's nothing out there at the moment. You either have like recruiters who are able to try and attract people, or you have job boards, which is very static. So this is about building like a two-way conversation between employers and potential employees.
Great. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming in today
Thanks.
and sharing your story. This is truly inspiring, and I'm sure we'll continue the conversation outside.
Cool.
Thank you.